Ministers, the idea is, of course, to keep this meeting very, very informal. This meeting stems from the ADB annual meeting we had in Frankfurt recently, where some of the disciplinary ministers have got together and had discussions about how we can collaborate with each other, as there are a number of cross-cutting issues. But there are also other issues pertaining to some areas, whether it's taxation, whether it's compliance issues, or whether it is indeed accessing climate finance, that some of us may have experienced different forms in those respective areas, different forms of processes. Some of us may have had an advanced methodology or advanced progression on those respective areas. So we thought it would be good to have this gathering. It is on the back of the Regional Pacific Civil Aviation Ministers meeting which we had yesterday. And I must say it was a very, very good meeting. And I'm sure the ministers will agree we had a very good outcome, where we've taken a very united approach in respect of our position in the ICAO meeting that's upcoming in September. We'll have some very short presentations, as you can see from the program in front of you. We have with us also from the Fijian side, the Permanent Secretary for Finance, Margareta Conrote, who's our first female Permanent Secretary for Finance. We have the Deputy Permanent Secretary, Mr. Krishna, and then we have the Acting CEO for FERCA, Vish Das, and his team. We have people, of course, from our debt management people and also from climate change department. They'll do some very short presentations, and we've kept it very fluid, very informal. The idea would be they'll do about 15-minute presentations on each of the areas. And then we can have, we've got a question and answer session and ideas session after the morning tea, where some of you may want to then share some of your experiences and some of the challenges and how we can collaborate and work with each other. And maybe even we could have some outcomes. If I could highlight very briefly, one of the things that we think that we could benefit from is that there are probably three areas. One is, of course, the processing of grants and concessions and loans that we get from organizations like World Bank, IMF, and even ADB, where a lot of the assessments is fundamentally based on gross national income per capita. So if you are above a particular threshold, you do not get the grant, you do not get the concessionary loans. Now, our position has been, and we've said this publicly, that given the fact that we have economies that are fundamentally prone to a lot of vulnerabilities, such as climate change, and the fact that our economic base is not very broad, we're extremely vulnerable. So even though, say, for example, in Fiji's case, we are classified as a middle-income country, as I highlighted to the civil aviation ministers yesterday, if the Cyclone Winston had basically gone on the path that they originally projected it to be on, it could have taken out the capital city. A third of the population lives there, most of our manufacturing plants are there, factories are there. It would have then continued through the middle of the island and wiped out the tourism industry, ending up here. So suddenly we've had 7 years of growth. We've had about 4 years of, 3 to 4 years of growth in excess of 4%. That could have been wiped out by one climatic event. So that's how extremely vulnerable we are. If we compare ourselves, say, to Christchurch, New Zealand, they had a massive earthquake, billions of dollars of damage. Yet New Zealand's economy is still buoyant, still functioning. It has not been damaged the way that ours would have been if we had that climatic event go through Fiji. So that's the vulnerability that we have. So what we are proposing, and this is something of course we can discuss after morning tea, whether we should approach these multilateral agencies and talk about some other form of indexing when they are going to consider concession loans, etc. Because the philosophy, of course, is that if you do well, then you get punished, notwithstanding the fact that you are vulnerable. The other aspect, of course, is climate financing itself, as we discovered in Germany, and as we discovered along the way, that Accessing climate finance is not necessarily very easy. It is quite bureaucratic. Climate finance, of course, is not only in the form of grant, it's also in the form of soft loans. So there are two aspects from that, what we had discussed, and we've been pushing in various forums, and we have some good news in that front. One of that is that the ability to access these funds is quite bureaucratic, and many of our officials aren't necessarily attuned to the systems and do not know necessarily how to navigate through this maze to get to the actual fund. At the moment, I understand there is no Pacific Island country financial institution that has been certified to be a recognized agency to receive funds. I understand there's a meeting in Samoa of the board, the Climate Fund, Green Growth Fund, Green Climate Fund, sorry, later on. And we had put in an application for Fiji Development Bank to be one of those institutions. They will make a decision then. But many Pacific Island countries aren't. We recently received actually a grant of about $32 million. But we had to go through the ADB, because ADB is a recognized agency. This is for some water projects. So I think there's a lot of capacity building that's required, in particular amongst our officials, to be able to know how to access these funds. The other issue that we've also highlighted is the inability of the Pacific Island countries to access funds because of the lack of what they call bankable projects. Those bankable projects are not possible apparently because of the fact that they look at large-scale volume. So if somebody, there may be some funds available, there may be some soft loans available. For example, to do solar farms. When they do solar farms in countries like Africa or in the continent of Africa and various other places, some of the larger countries, they have, literally hundreds of acres of land that may be assigned for solar panels. Now, we don't have that kind of capacity. So therefore, we actually miss out on those types of funding that's available. So what we have said at various forums recently, beginning of this year and last year, is that the Pacific Island countries could come together to have a bankable project. So, maybe there's about 4 or 5 countries over here that could be interested in doing solar farms. But if we got together, then we have the volume. So we could then put a proposal to one of these agencies to say, look, there's 6 countries, and if you add up all the acreage of land that we're making available, we actually have a bankable project. So then they get actually interested. But if we go along as Fiji or Cook Islands or Samoa or Tonga on our own, you will not necessarily get that kind of attraction that you require. So that's something also that we'd like to, that we can discuss and think about. The other aspect, of course, is the debt management. We are doing a few things with our debt in terms of, we are also working with the Commonwealth Organization in trying to rearrange our debt stock. We have, treasury bills that have been issued over a period of time. For example, when the Bainimarama government was appointed in 2007, at the end of 2006, there was debt stock already of about $2 billion. That had been accumulated over a period of time. So perhaps there's an opportunity for us as Pacific Islanders to, have a look at how we can manage our debts individually as countries, and how we can learn from each other, and perhaps even do something a lot more smarter. We, for example, in the past few years, we've looked at some of the loans, and if we were able to pay it off, we targeted some loans to pay it off earlier because the interest rates were quite high. So we borrowed at a cheaper interest rate to pay off a high interest rate fund, a loan. There's some of the sort of small things that can be done, and we'll have a bit of a discussion on that. The other area, of course, that we're presenting to you is, and they're getting slightly longer time, about 20 minutes. We have to control the tax guys because they love talking for hours. So we've done some tax reforms also. And for example, we've introduced the environmental levy in Fiji. We have a service turnover tax. We've done some other things in the recently announced budget. As I was mentioning to some of the ministers yesterday, we have now said that departure tax will no longer be applicable if the person stays for 72 hours or less in Fiji. So we are attracting transit passengers. The fact that we are now, flying to LA, San Francisco, Hong Kong, Singapore. So if somebody wants to use Fiji as a transit point and say do Singapore, Fiji, New Zealand, if they stay here for 2 days, they don't have to pay departure tax. Our departure tax is $200. So these are the kind of things that we are doing, and maybe that's something you can learn. But so those ministers who weren't here yesterday, we've had some side discussions about how we need to be able to market the Pacific as a package of tourism, because we are missing out on the long haul markets. A person, say from Northern Europe, won't necessarily come to just one country for a holiday for 2 weeks. But if we're able to package it, say they came to Fiji, they go and do whale watching in Tonga, they may go and do some other event in Samoa and visit some other country, Tuvalu, whatever the case may be, and we can package that. It could be a package with Vanuatu and some of other countries thrown in. And we seriously need to look at that, because we are very much dependent, most of the countries over here, in terms of the tourism arrivals, very much dependent on Australia and New Zealand. So we need to be able to ensure that we reduce our risk if we're going to rely on tourism. If we are very heavily dependent on two source markets, if there is an economic downturn in those countries, it will have a huge impact on our tourism sector, because tourism arrivals will reduce. So what we have taken as approach is how do we minimize our risks. So there are some of the issues that we thought we would flag with you, and that can be points of discussion. As you can see, we have not put flags or anything, so we don't people to be very formal. And as we discussed in Germany, we'd like to also exchange ideas. We had yesterday we had organized some site visits, in particular for the civil aviation ministers. We took them to the air traffic control tower. We took them to the renovations that's taking place at the airport, and also to the Civil Aviation Authority of Fiji. If any of you are interested in some form of a site visit, please let us know. We're quite open to that. There are other places to visit that you may be interested in. So with those few words, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to once again welcome you. We can discuss in terms of what we have done in Fiji. We have a huge infrastructure spent in the past few years. Just by way of comparison, at the end of 2006, the budget announcement, 85% of the budget spent in each year went into operational costs, 15% went to infrastructure built. Now the mix has changed. We have had a different focus. 60% of our budget goes into operational expenses, and 40% goes into asset build. So there's a huge infrastructure build. You'll see a lot of roads being torn up and fixed up and four-laning and all of that. And the idea is to invest in the infrastructure. We're investing quite heavily in our people. So we provided free education, even loan scheme for university students. So there's a number of things that we can discuss. But I'll now hand over to the Permanent Secretary, who's going to talk about climate finance with a 15-minute presentation, and then with the DPS on the accessing funds from ADB, World Bank, etc. Thank you once again, and we look forward to fruitful discussion. Binaka.
That's wait.
Very bossy photographer.
Right, eh? Okay, smile. Wait, you move a little bit this side? Yeah, right. Okay.